And, and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you happen to be around the world. And welcome to another edition of the Groovy podcast. My name is Ken Kousen, podcasting from Marlborough, Connecticut. And today I am joined by.
Jenn Strater from Berlin, Germany.
Welcome, Jen. It's good to see you again.
And to you.
So I should warn any of our current listeners or participants that Jen is having some internet connectivity issues. We can always blame that on Google, if you like.
The local cable company in this case.
So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that'll get me to encourage you to talk while we have you, in case you wind up. So you're now at Gradle, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I started as one of the developer advocates back in October, and so we've been going for a few months now.
I've seen you pretty active on Twitter as a dev advocate. Are you going to a lot of conferences and things? What do they have you doing?
I'm not going. Well, I'm not going to that many events in person. I've been ramping up a little bit. There's a lot of stuff about Gradle that I didn't know. I didn't know that I didn't know. And so I've been learning a lot about the other parts of Gradle other than the ones that I've used before, and doing a lot more writing and asynchronous things. So we had that webinar back in November that Eric and I did. I've been working on a lot of content for later in this year, as well as some just internal things and developer experience things that we can work on.
Have you worked on the user manual or anything like that? You say you're doing a lot of writing. Oh, there she froze. Oh, sorry, you froze there for a second. Could you say that again, please?
So I started at a very interesting time, right when Gradle 5.0 was about to be released. And so there was a lot of writing and work that needed to be done there. So I did help out with some of the user guides and release notes and restructuring of content there, as I thought stuff was confusing. So maybe we should move it around a little bit. And just as I started going to some of the local meetup groups and talking with different people, and as I got more feedback, the more things that we started either changing the docs directly or at least creating tickets to do so in the future.
So I've noticed that group, the Dev Advocate group at Gradle, has expanded. I mean, that's under Eric Wendelin still?
Right, yeah. So we started as the developer experience team.
Right.
But so it's Andres and I as developer advocates, and Eric doing some advocacy and a lot of developer experience.
So that's Andres Almire joined you, right?
Correct.
Have you had to interact with him at all, or are you just operating
every
in different every day? Really? So yeah. How's that going?
It's interesting. We're trying to kind of figure out responsibilities, and so he's only been with Gradle since the beginning of January. It's still very new, and I guess it's the same problem that kind of a lot of developer experience teams come in with. That I was the first one that started, and then so we just kind of got our team together, and then a new person joined, and so now we have to figure it out all over again.
I understand. Well, I suppose by way of a segue, that reminds me that the biggest new release to mention in our show notes this week, right, is now Gradle did actually 2 releases. They did a 5.2 and then a 5.2.1.
Correct. There were a couple big bug fixes that went out in that 5.2.1 release.
That's the only difference there, right?
Yeah, I mean it's a point release, so just minor things. The big new features are actually in the 5.2.0 line.
So in the show notes, we put in stuff about the Java platform plugin and some other stuff. Is there anything in the list there that you want to say anything about?
So probably the thing that is the most exciting for me is the Java platform plugin. So the big thing there is that with Gradle now you can publish Maven bombs and kind of dictate how you want those dependencies to be in the project that you're publishing. Maven bombs.
I'm all right. Now I got to admit, I've only used Maven to the extent that I was on a project that used Maven, and therefore I had to use it. So I don't really know
Yeah.
uh, what really is a Maven bomb as opposed to just regular palms.
So a bomb is a specific type of palm that I'm going to say this incorrectly, aren't I? It defines or declares dependencies. So I guess the opposite. First in Gradle 5.0, we added the ability to consume palms or consume bombs. So if another project, say Spring, for example, had a published bomb, then we could, or not we, my project, my personal Spring Restox project that I've been using, can import that bomb and then take the dependencies that that bomb had defined, and then either take them with. So there's enforced platform, which means that like you take everything as it is, and then you can also, if you really need to, override some of those recommendations. If that makes any sense.
I mean, but that's my fault. I've never really dug into it. You know what I mean? I sooner or later I need to, and I know, of course, the Spring people have been strong motivators for some of this because they are very much biased in favor of Maven, and they have bombs for everything. And as long as Gradle can accommodate that, that'll make life easier with them, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean it's not a bad idea. So like to have something defined and then consume it. It's a list of recommendations.
Well, when I look at the platform plugin, because it's in the user guide now, they've got a whole section on it. So it talks about description of modules to be published together and a set of recommended versions for heterogeneous libraries. There's a good word for you. A typical example includes the Spring Boot bomb. I knew that was coming. And sharing a set of dependency versions between subprojects. So I don't know, is this something that, it sounds like it's something for people who have an existing bomb can leverage to do some additional publishing rather than something I need to learn as a user. Is that about right? Who knows?
That's pretty fair. I think, yeah, that's going to be most of, I mean, not necessarily like just open source and just like Spring teams, but also people who share things between modules in their own organization.
I shouldn't be putting you on the spot like that. I didn't warn you.
No, I mean it's stuff I need to be up to date on. I'm a little bit weary of saying the wrong terms still. I've definitely like been a Gradle user forever, and this Maven stuff is still a little new to me.
Well, just do what I do, and just keep in mind that almost nobody's listening. So you can say whatever you like. It'll be fine. I mean, the one thing I do know is Baruch's not going to listen to this. So I mean, really, I'll give him a hard time about it. And said, we covered that on the last one. You weren't there. Did you listen? And of course I yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So at any rate, if you make a mistake, I mean, again, it's a friendly community. Don't worry about it. I did notice also that the thing they pointed out in the 5.2 release was that they have new C++ plugins, and there's been a big drive to do the native stuff. Do you play with any of that?
I've been trying to help with some of the writing around this, but I haven't actually used the native plugins. So the thing that's kind of important here is that the plugins themselves are not really new. So they've been in kind of an incubating stage for a while. We knew for a long time that we wanted these, what we're calling the new plugins, the new model of plugins, to replace the old software model plugins. And so the point where we are now is that they got this big improvement in 5.2, and now we're recommending them. So if you are starting a new C++ project using Gradle, you should use those new plugins instead of the old ones.
When I teach the intro class for Gradle, that's pretty much what I do with them now. Officially, then the question always comes up of how to work with native projects. And the last few times I've taught the class, the message I've been giving them is that's all changing. Don't, we're not going to include that in the intro class, and read the docs and everything. And it looks like that's starting to actually come out, because they've also added apparently to the build init plugin. Now you can make C++ applications or C++ libraries as well.
Correct. Yeah. And yeah, you should definitely read that section more in detail. There's some differentiations between the different C++ options that you have in building it.
And the thing that also jumped out at me, I'm looking at the release notes now, is they've changed something about, it says the new plugins do not currently support C, which is interesting,
Yeah.
or Objective-C, Objective-C++. Well, that I'm not really surprised. I mean, the people doing Objective-C have largely moved on to Swift, if I understand correctly. I mean, that's a lot of the iOS people, unless there's users of Objective-C outside of that. I could be wrong about that. But then there's a link that says they have a lot of other things to offer, like composite build support and the build cache and all that. Oh, that reminds me. So the webinar that you did with, I think you did it with Eric, is that right?
Correct.
So that was about, or was that, did you not do that one? The one about giving the Maven support now that you can do build scans and the build cache with Maven tasks. Is that right?
Okay, so Eric and I did a webinar on what's new in Gradle 5 back in November.
Okay.
But since then, the Maven team or the Maven support team has given another webinar that was, well, we have the video online now. So if you go to Gradle.com/blog, you'll see all the recent webinars and videos. And then we have another training coming up related to that, actually, on March 7th that you can see on the Gradle training page, which is gradle.org/training.
That page I know all about.
Yeah, actually, I probably should have given you, I should have cross-referenced this in the show notes, but I didn't look at the Gradle section, of course. Yeah, I saw the 5.2 release notes, but yeah, we should plug the webinar or the training, sorry, that's coming up as well on March 7th.
Yeah, I'm glancing at the training page now, and they've got a build cache deep dive on February 21st, and then the webinar making the most out of the build cache on the 28th, and then the one you just mentioned, the March 7th one, on accelerate and optimize Apache Maven trademark builds with Gradle Enterprise. So they've actually trademarked that term, huh?
So Apache has some trademarks, yes. I mean, the same thing kind of applies when we talk about Groovy. So Apache, we should be using like Apache Groovy,
right.
But I actually don't think that they have the TM on that one, or at least I haven't been using it. But Maven definitely, like if you look through all their legal jargon, we should be using the TM for Maven.
Well, you could talk to Eric, but I mean, again, don't worry about it. Nobody's going to care. That does remind me of an old trademark story. Apparently, when I was first teaching Java, a lot of times we'd refer to JDBC, and it would always be spelled out as Java Database Connectivity. Except that the truth is if you looked at the Sun site at the time, it was JDBC trademark, and it was never spelled out. It was a trademarked acronym that stood for nothing. You know, even though we all knew it stood for Java Database Connectivity, it's clearly lawyers had gotten involved, which, knowing Oracle, is not at all a surprise. They always say their legal department is 3 times the size of the development side. You know. Okay, so back to the show notes. I think that's everything in the Gradle release there. Groovy did a quick release, the 2.5.6 one. You notice that? And it's according to Paul King's tweet, which I just put in a link to the tweet. What did he say? Over 20 fixes for traits, static compilation, in particular class cast errors, and various regressions. So
lots of fixes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's great. If it wasn't for Paul King, it's just like, I'm so glad he's still plugging away at this stuff.
Yeah.
And I imagine the focus, if it hasn't already, will be turning to Groovy 3 relatively near future.
We hope so. I've definitely been hearing lots of things about Groovy 3 from the Great Comp side. We of course hope that's out by the time our conference rolls around the end of May. Yeah.
Why don't we jump to that right away? I mean, I know it's out of order or whatever, but how are you involved in? Oh, you got the mug and everything. See, at least My participation is just that I'm wearing my Micronaut shirt, for what it's
I
worth.
did see that. Yeah, I
Yeah, I
don't
got it
have
from
mine.
Jeff.
I just got my special custom 2N Jenn Micronaut shirt. I'm very excited about that.
Is that the one where you put a picture on the tweet?
Yeah. It was really hard to get a picture of it because it's the normal Micronaut on the front, but then I wanted to get the front and the back in the same shot, so I tried to use a mirror and anyway. Yeah, I'm very happy, and you'll just have to see it in person.
Yep, social media. So what's going on with, well, first of all, how are you involved in GrayConf? What's your participation?
So I'm on the organizing committee. So there's a group of maybe 10 of us that help out with various things throughout the year. In particular, they utilize my skills as a native English speaker. So a lot of marketing and stuff, tweets. I did that tweet stream for the CFP. We just went through and I think we picked speakers, and I think we're in the process that we haven't sent out all of the emails yet. So I won't reveal any secrets about the things that we decided until that's official.
But that's the whole point of having you here, is you get to reveal secrets.
Reveal secrets.
Yeah, I think I saw a tweet from them. Was it yesterday or something, saying that they are preparing to release the list of speakers and everything, the agenda.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because the way that it works, like you, as a conference, send out the people that you accepted, and not everyone, like maybe they've submitted to multiple things the same week, and so sometimes people back out, and we don't want to confirm until everything is finalized. But once we do, we'll have the agenda up.
Are you planning to speak there yourself?
Maybe.
Very good.
Actually, so one thing that I will say is that it was actually really difficult. Normally we go through the list and like there's a group of like really top talks, and then there's some things that are like, okay, we're just going to reject these right away. But there were no talks that we rejected right away. Like everything that everyone submitted was awesome and something that I wanted to see.
Wow.
So it was really, really hard to pick this year.
Is the location the same? I mean, I know it's in Copenhagen, but is it at that same technical university?
Yep. Yeah. So the ITU is the university where we had the conference, and it's been there for several years. It's a really good venue. I mean, it's one of the more high-tech universities in Denmark, so they have a lot of really nice IT systems in the auditoriums, and kind of it works as a nice space. And since it's a university and not a big conference center, it's a little bit less expensive.
Oh, okay. And also, of course, they don't have a lot of restrictions on the Wi-Fi or things like that, which tends to go with academic environments. They rather, I should say it the other way, that a lot of academic environments do not restrict the Wi-Fi, don't have a lot of block sites and things like that. So I don't know if that's an issue or not.
That.
Sorry?
They are pretty. I haven't run into any issues with blocking particular websites. We do have individual logins for the university system, and so when you get your badge at GrayConf, you have to like have a personal login, and I'm sure that they're making sure you're not doing anything illegal, because there's a lot of stricter laws about that in Europe. Yeah.
So actually, we didn't say the dates yet. So the dates, according to what I understand, I got to take out the call for papers deadline. The dates are May 27th through 29th. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. It's always that same week number. This year, it's a little like all entirely in May, from the 27th to the 29th.
Okay. And is there anything else you want to? Oh, I guess we should say something to the effect that the sad news, of course, that GrayConf in the U.S. is not going to happen this year. Okay.
That is a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we saw it kind of dwindling year over year, and it takes a lot of energy to run a conference, and a lot of it takes a lot to admit that it's time to shut it down.
Well, last year,
I really respect them for that.
The attendance was so very low last year. There really wasn't. There weren't a lot of people there. I managed to take out I took out the call for paper deadlines for Greach and not Great Comp. That figures. That's what happens when I was trying to listen to you, so that's good, right? You know,
Yeah.
while doing this at the same time, you know. Um,
Multitasking.
yeah, hopefully Great Conf will be back in the U.S. or there'll be something. What I'm wondering is whether
Yeah.
that affected the number of submissions you got. You know, that suddenly that
We
you
we
know whether
hope.
that led to an increase in. Hopefully, it'll lead to an increase in attendance, if nothing else, as well.
Yeah, so we definitely hope that people that are from the U.S. Will come to Europe. It's a really nice trip. It's one of the first trips that I ever made out
Mm,
of the U.S. And then decided that I like Copenhagen so much that I wanted to move there. Of
mm.
course, so I definitely recommend it as a trip to visit from the U.S. And hopefully we'll get some speakers from everywhere too. Uh,
So I imagine you'll be tweeting about the lineup and the keynotes and all that stuff over the next week or so. I imagine.
yes, yeah. Once it's all confirmed, and uh, yeah, usually Soren will start tweeting with that. But
Okay.
I'll definitely promote it
Yeah, he
and see
likes to
what
do that.
else. Yeah, and of course, hopefully the U.S. one starts up again in the future. Maybe one day if I go back to Minnesota.
Right, right. Well, the in the meantime, of course, the next major thing in the U.S. that's going to be regarding Groovy at all is DevNexus, or as they're referring to it now, DevNexus 2GM. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a masterpiece in marketing. I just can't believe it. So Groovy. Now the question is, of course, is 2G. Is that Groovy and Grails? Is that Groovy and Gradle? You know, is that Groovy and Griffin? Um, who knows,
There's no,
right?
yeah. I mean, I
Oh,
don't think it's Gradle. There's not too much Gradle content there.
yeah, that's too
Um,
bad, actually.
yeah.
Of course, we know the M part is Micronaut, and
Of
that
course.
was partly a segue. By the way, for the people who might be listening, that's probably our next Groovy podcast. Is that Baruch and I will both be at DevNexus, so I imagine we'll find an hour or so that we can grab some people who are attending and see if we could do some kind of podcast from there. You're not coming to DevNexus, are you?
I'm not, but Andres will be there, so you should grab him.
Yeah, we did last year, and we probably should again this year. After all, that'd be a good idea. But that was also my roundabout segue to say that the other big release this week, or if you will, or the recently, is Micronaut. So Micronaut brought out a 1.0.4 release where they modularized everything. So if I understand this correctly, they turned it into a core module and a bunch of sub projects so that they can all evolve those independently. I didn't know that it wasn't already modularized, but apparently it was not. And then as I put the show notes together, was it last night, this morning, yesterday, they announced the milestone 1 release of Micronaut 1.1, which seems to add a bunch of deployment stuff like AWS API gateways and Graal and a whole bunch of other stuff related to that. Have you done
Yeah.
anything with Micronaut yet at all?
Nothing past like the basic tutorials.
Yeah.
So I mean, we tried a proof of concept before the last job, but I wasn't directly involved with that. And then now I've been doing a bunch of different things and not as much engineering.
Well, if I
So
understand correctly, in addition to having a tutorial day at DevNexus, they're also going to have an actual 2-day training class run by Graham Roche.
nice.
If I get that correctly, and you know what, I was on the Micronaut website. It probably has something about it there, Micronaut.io, and I guess the easiest thing would be to go. Oh, maybe events. That might be the way to go. Um, DevNexus 2GM training event. Micronaut from IoT to GCP. So presumably that's Google Cloud Platform, right?
Yeah, probably.
And
I suspect.
assume so. So that's March 4th and 5th, and it doesn't say who at the moment, but from what I understood, oh, that one says James Clee, actually. Huh. I thought the tweets were saying that Graham was going to be involved in that. Maybe that's changed. I don't know. So at any rate, that'll be a chance to learn more about that for anybody who happens to be interested. Okay. Yeah, I haven't spent much time with Micronaut yet either. I'm thinking it's probably time. You know, I don't think I'll be there early for that training class, but I'll be at the conference, so I'm going to go to some of the Micronaut talks. I mean, I've mostly just seen Graham's presentation and Jeff Brown as well, and you know how they put it to use, but I haven't actually done it myself yet. And since it's still growing, it's probably worth talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting concept, and they're hitting a lot of really good target markets, and supporting a lot of different platforms. I just haven't had a use case to use it.
Yeah, well, the other feature of Micronaut, of course, which makes it somewhat controversial to bring it up on the Groovy podcast, is that it supports Java. And what's your over under on the first mention of Kotlin? Because there it is. Right.
It's Kotlin.
Yeah. So apparently they support that too. You know, but actually one of the interesting things about Micronaut from the Groovy point of view is that in Grails 4, which a lot of OCI attention's turned to recently, they will be taking a lot of the Micronaut infrastructure and replacing some Spring-related things in Grails with that. They're going to be leveraging the Micronaut advances they've made inside of Grails, and that'll be a big deal in Grails 4.
Yeah, I mean, and they've been talking about that for over a year now. That when, especially, I mean, in that first keynote about Micronaut, it was always to like make it for Grails 4. I think we're a little behind schedule, but it's still amazing that they've made such progress.
Well, the next news item is one that's probably closer to things that you do more frequently. They apparently CodeNarc had a new release as well. You were a big CodeNarc user, but you did a lot of well, actually, why don't you say it? What did you do?
So I tend to contribute to CodeNarc kind of in spurts when I have time. I have like this long list of things that I want to see in CodeNarc and not as much time to actually do them. And so things like when I go to Hacker Gardens at GreatConf.eu, I tend to pull that list out. So this 1.3 release is actually not anything that I contributed to, but it's still very exciting in lots of other ways. So there's lots of improvements and new rules related to Java docs, and like just a long list of new contributions and new contributors. So it's exciting from that perspective.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw. Oh, sorry.
I'll have to update all my projects.
Okay. I mean, what I was going to say, and it's the asynchronous nature of this thing. I didn't see a what do you call it, a release notes link or anything like that. All I saw was the tweet that said it had been updated. So I just put in the basic link to CodeNarc. Did you see a list of release notes or anything like that?
Yes. Well, so there's a few different things that happen. So there's a CodeNarc mailing list, which you should join if you haven't. And Chris, who's the project lead of CodeNarc, also posted to the Groovy mailing list with the announcements related to the release. I'm sorry.
Who's the head of the project there?
Oh, Chris Meyer. We don't know him outside of CodeNarc. If you look at his GitHub profile, that's it's that and Gmetrics and some of the other static analysis things that he maintains and has taken over the years. Let's see. Oh, and it's also part of the project itself. So if you go to CodeNarc on GitHub, there's a very and that's actually one of the smoothest contribution processes that I've ever done. They when you start a new rule or a contribution for CodeNarc, there's this executable that prompts you for all of the things, and then it updates the release notes, and you have to go through all of those things. So it's actually really well documented in that way.
Well, I drilled into the actual files there, and I see that inside there they've got it must be the README or whatever, but it's showing the new rules that have been added to it and updated enhanced rules and bug fixes. So there's a list there. I just didn't see a formal write-up of anything that, to try to say, oh, this is why you need to upgrade this one.
Right. So I think that was what was posted to the mailing list.
Oh, okay, okay.
But I
So,
mean, it's pretty much a summary of the README.
okay, so you're a fan though. You've been using CodeNarc for a while, right?
Yeah, and I like the time that I spent in Copenhagen was about contributing to CodeNarc and getting a better idea of how it worked. So, yeah,
Very good.
definitely a fan.
So 1.3 came out recently. Take a look at it, to whoever, and it's a very nice, powerful system.
It is.
Okay, back to the notes here. I think that was all the releases that I saw. There wasn't a Grails release or anything that I'm aware of, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of any other major project in the ecosystem. I mean, you talk to Andres all the time. I assume if there had been a Griffin release, he would have said something about it.
Yeah, I mean, he did actually do a decent interview with Sergio on his Groovy Calamari podcast about
Oh my!
Griffin, and I learned some things about the history of Griffin. So shout out to that.
I want to listen to the Groovy Calamari podcast. I do, and the problem is that I only can listen to it online. It's not listed in my Google Podcasts. And I don't do the Apple stuff. I don't have an iPhone or anything. So I was on a long plane ride recently, and I thought, okay, I'll catch up on podcasts, and I couldn't, and I blame Sergio for that, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing about that, by the way, just to in case Sergio happens to be listening, where are your show notes? I can't find them. I mean, they're not linked on the Groovy Calamari podcast homepage or anything, and unless I'm missing something obvious. So, at any rate, I'm a couple podcasts behind on the Groovy Calamari one, and I do want to listen to that, and I will catch up eventually. But he keeps giving us a hard time, so we have to at least push back a little bit on that.
I guess and the one thing that I didn't realize is that when he first announced it, he said it was going to be in Spanish, but actually, at least the ones that I've listened to are all in English, so it's totally all accessible.
The other thing he announced, by the way, in that first podcast is they were going to be 30 minutes or shorter, and he hasn't had one that's 30 minutes shorter.
Yeah. I think we know a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, but at least we didn't come out and say we were going to be 30 minutes or shorter. He did. Now, of course, that means if we bring that up, then to be fair, we should mention that Greach is on the way. Are you going to Greach? Do you know?
No. We do have 2 Gradle engineers going to Greach. So Andres, obviously, who's going to give a keynote and a workshop on Gradle plugins, and then Felipe is giving a talk about how we use CI at Gradle.
So Greach is March 28th through 30th, and I'm looking here and I see, of course, they've got the parallel tracks with the track 1 is the microservices and JVM frameworks, and track 2 is Android tests and JVM lags. And I really wish I could go. I really probably should have submitted, and I in the end I wimped out because I have a no fluff commitment that's blocking the same weekend, except there's a chance I won't even go. I mean, it was just at any rate. But I see that Graham Rocher will be there, and Guillaume Laforge will be there, and Antonio Leva I've wanted to talk to for a while. He's listed there as a Kotlin expert, but what he really does, he's an Android guy.
Yeah, there's a bit of overlap between those two.
Yes, well,
between Android and the Android and Kotlin communities.
And then I see Andres up there being listed, and Mercedes Weiss, Oracle Groundbreaker Ambassador. Do you know that that's what they've changed our name to? Did you know that?
Oh, instead of the Java Champions?
I know. Well, no, Java
stars,
Champion. Fortunately, Java Champion is still Java Champion. But they had a title called Oracle Developer Champion. Okay. And at the last meeting, the big meeting that happened at the conference formerly known as Java 1, they announced that the new name of the program was going to be Oracle Groundbreaker Ambassador.
Groundbreaker Ambassador. Okay, because there's the Groundbreaker Awards too.
Yeah, right? That's different, right?
And
Groundbreaker Award, that's cool. That's what Graham won, and deservedly so, and that's phenomenal. No. We are Groundbreaker Ambassadors. And I didn't want to say it out loud, but I'm like, I don't want to be a Groundbreaker Ambassador. I don't even want to be in this program anymore, if that's what you're going to call it. I mean, that's embarrassing, right? I mean, I'm not even a Groundbreaker. I'm a Groundbreaker Ambassador. And it's like, come on. And so at the end of the year, in order to maintain your status with them, you have to fill out some form to say what you did during the year, and because you're supposed to be talking about Oracle's cloud product. You ever use Oracle's cloud product?
Maybe several years ago. Wait, oh no,
Wow.
but that would have been pre-cloud, right? So I don't think I've used the cloud product, no.
Yeah, well, neither is anybody else. I mean, well, I shouldn't say that, but I mean, it's not a big part of the marketplace. I mean, you either use
Okay.
Amazon or you use Google or you use Azure, you use Microsoft. But at any rate, I said, I mean, so really it opens up the question, why be a groundbreaker ambassador in the first place, which was my question when they talked to me, because the head of the program approached me because I was a Java champion, said, you want to be a groundbreaker? Well, she didn't say that. She said, you want to be an Oracle developer champion? I said, what's that about? She said, well, we'll give you travel funds to Java 1. And I'm like, okay. So I thought
Okay.
that would be good. And therefore I did the application and everything. But now they've changed the name. And as I say, I was filling out the form and they want you to upload your slides to demonstrate that you did at least talk about the Oracle cloud product, and I uploaded my slides, but I didn't talk about the Oracle cloud product. And now I'm waiting to see if they just let me ride, for the coming year or whatever. But at any rate, the reason I went off on that tangent is apparently an Oracle Groundbreaker ambassador will be at the Greach conference there, and they've got a picture of her and everything, and that's good, I guess. I mean, all the people I've met have been fine. That's not the issue. I don't mean to imply anything there. It's just that I just don't like the title anymore. Anyway, Greach is March 28th through 30th, and that looks to be really good. And I kind of wish I was going, but I'm afraid I won't be.
Yeah, I mean, so Mercedes is actually giving talks like at several different European conferences.
Oh, you know Mercedes?
I'm sorry, I haven't met her in person yet, but I've seen her name now on a lot of different conferences that we're tracking for Gradle,
okay.
or have submitted to.
So she's very active then. That's good.
Yeah.
Speaking of conferences, might as well finish that out because we listed DevNext's 2GM, which is March 6th through 8th. So that's just, I guess, 3 weeks away from this now. And Great Conf.eu, of course, we've talked about now, and Greach. And then it turns out the Micronaut Summit has been delayed. From what I understand, that's run by Dave Klein and his, brood there.
Klein Family Production.
Yeah, the Klein bottle, as it were. Any rate, so they apparently decided that it was too early for a dedicated conference for Micronaut. And the other issue, from what I gather, is that, of course, OCI is going to be playing a big role in that. I mean, obviously. And it's relatively close. Having it in April would be very, very close to DevNexus. So both of those made it a very logical thing to delay that into the fall. But from what I understand, there will be one in the fall on that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense. I mean, there's a lot of events in the spring right now. And at least from like my perspective, it was really hard to argue that we should go to Chicago for like the one day for such a small event. So maybe by the fall, it'll be something that we can do.
Okay, so looking at our blogs and other post stuff, I did see that statistics tweet. Now, Baruch always has a very low regard for download numbers. He seems to think that just because a download number is high doesn't have any significance. I would say that it's an imperfect measure of interest, but it is still interesting that apparently the tweet said, see, who is the tweet from? Oh, I grabbed it off the Apache Groovy Twitter feed. That just said that Groovy was downloaded 30 million times during the last quarter of 2018 and crossed 100 million downloads for the whole year. So that sounds good to me. I mean, it still sounds like it's very active and going on. I mean, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, download numbers are download numbers. We deal with that at Gradle too. That the numbers fluctuate sometimes, and it's hard to explain why. And like, there's always is it a CI, like the CI downloading every time, or like what is that actually coming from? I mean, so the fact that like there is still some downloads is nice, and it definitely shows that people are still using it. The Groovy is still alive, so that, I mean, from that perspective, it's nice.
Well, that led to the other, if you care about any of these sorts of things, the one that you added in today about, or yesterday about, Groovy being back in the top 20 of the Tyobe index.
Yeah, I linked to a particular one that I found very colorful, and so it's from Jack Center.
Yeah.
And I really liked the description of Groovy. There are so many puns. It's awesome. So you should check out that one article. And
Groovy's electric slide back into the top 20. Oh my goodness.
There's lots of very colorful language. So it's kind of funny. And yeah, but I mean, it's really nice that we're back on the TOB index. Of course, can't take too much stock in that, because their metrics are not great, and always changing.
And apparently that put Groovy just ahead of Swift, interestingly enough, and just behind Go. But all of those are behind Visual Basic. So again, what are you going to, what are you going to say? The interesting fact, of course, just as a reminder, is that we're talking about 1% of the market or something. We're talking about very small numbers. Interestingly enough, what I do not see in the top 10 is Kotlin, right?
No, it's in the, I think, top 50, which, yeah.
Interesting. I didn't go on to go look at the details there. Yeah, TypeScript is taking a nosedive, and some of the other, it's interesting. So, but at any rate, SQL joined the Tyobe chart after it became Turing complete.
Oh, yeah, and like I said, that one article is actually really awesome. So you should, if you're going to read anything about the TOB index, read that one.
Okay, so I've got it open. I'll take a look afterwards. Yeah.
Okay.
Our good friend Virtual Dogbert, better known as Tucker Pelletier, right? You want to say anything about his Enterprise Groovy plugin?
So he actually pinged us on Twitter earlier today about a few things that he's been doing. So first, it's really awesome that he's been so active and picked up a lot of work in the Groovy community and is creating some of these libraries. The one that I think is interesting that I wanted to talk about is the Enterprise Groovy plugin. So
I assume that means it runs on starships, right? Sorry, go ahead. I just couldn't.
I mean, it goes with Spock, right?
Very good.
Anyway, yes. I wonder. I actually haven't looked too much in detail, but I've read the summary, and so I think it's a really good idea. The idea with this plugin is that it sets up some like presets for things that you want to do in a large Groovy system. So things like turning on compile static by default, having some like predefined structure to your like builds, and yeah, so I think we linked to the documentation there, and he's looking for feedback. So that's the major reason why he pinged us. So if you have a chance to use it and give him feedback before he does the official release, he would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm trying to. What he doesn't have in that documentation is the elevator pitch. For why are we using this? What's it for? But of course, it's not formally released yet, right? I mean, it's
still in RC.
Yeah, it's in an RC, right? 1.0 RC2 apparently. So again, his introduction does say, what is it? One of the biggest complaints about Groovy is that it's a dynamically compiled language, and that it's anyway, optional static compilation fields bolted on. The Enterprise Groovy plugin, again, Spock has to be related, right? Yeah, that was very good. Fixes this by making static compilation the default and gives you configuration for optional enforcement. And that's about it. It's because they have a large team or have junior developers, this is where the Enterprise Groovy plugin comes in, giving the tools to rein in some of the dynamic power, but whitelist it where it is needed. So, okay.
So
and it looks like you're right. And it's your classic ASCII document. I mean, if somebody writes an ASCII doc, you could just see, right?
The style guide, yeah.
The Gradle docs are ASCII doc now, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, if you're talking in the like, we have lots of documentation now. So
Right,
anytime you see the
right.
documentation, I'm like, which one? Yeah,
That's
but
fair.
yeah, and it's all like custom at this point.
Okay, so now we can tell Tucker that we mentioned it, which is good because I think he wanted me to mention it the last one, and I completely missed it somehow. And so sorry. So we played it up this time, and hopefully that'll help. Okay, so the other thing, Guillaume Laforge, of course, put up a nice little blog post, which is actually surrounding a video that was released from last year's Great Conf. So this was posted in January on
Okay.
machine learning APIs with Apache Groovy.
Yeah, that was an interesting talk.
Oh, you
I
went to
learned
that?
quite a bit. Yeah.
So he's got the video there. He also had the slides. I skimmed through the slides, and it's basically using Groovy to invoke all the different Google APIs, things like vision and video and natural language processing and speech and on and on. So that looked very interesting. So you had a good time at that one?
I mean, it was interesting. I again don't have a use case to actually try it, but it looked fun.
Yep. And at any rate, so we put the video there, the link there, and of course, anything from Guillaume Laforge, we really
Yeah.
is a good idea to emphasize anyway. And then the other one I saw a couple other links. One was this post by I don't even remember who it was because it doesn't have a name on it. I mean, it's this one at Data Science Central. This thing called Best Dynamically Typed Programming Language for Data Analysis, and you think, well, that's restricting it pretty tightly. Except, of course, the major competitor there, the dominant language for data processing these days, or data not processing, but data well, analysis, I guess, would
The
be
scientific
Python.
libraries and everything. Yeah.
Pardon me?
Python are, I mean, you've got lots of competition in that space.
But I mean, for a dynamically typed one, I guess the big competition would be Python, right?
Right. Yeah. Python is probably what you're looking for.
I always like in the Python world, by the way, because you get all this pushback in the Java world against dynamic typing. They always say, no, it's the pendulum has swung so far toward the static typing side on that people who code in like Clojure don't even really speak up anymore because they don't want to hear it, you know. And what always gets me is that, of course, Python and JavaScript are probably two of the biggest used languages in the world, and they're both dynamically typed. And it's the Python people who have the best phrase about that. Did you study Python at all?
I did in university.
Yeah, right. And they said, you know, somebody'd say, well, but that could lead you into problems. You could assign the wrong thing to the wrong type and everything. And the phrase they use, and it's almost official at this point, is we're all adults here.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's what they say. So it's like, if that's going to cause problems, don't do that, you know? And you're like, oh, okay. But at any rate, this article was about comparing, let's see, what did they say? It was an interesting discussion on execution time of a simple Monte Carlo algorithm that calculates a pi value, and it was part of a Stack Overflow thread. This webpage lists implementations in Java, Python, Groovy, JRuby, of course, so you can compile Ruby into Java, Jython, same thing. And that even though Java language was the most performant, they said that the most performant dynamically typed implementation was Groovy. You know, they said the execution of the Groovy script on the JDK9 showed the same speed as for Java on the same thing. You can use dynamically typed language, and still the execution of the code could be as fast as for a full-blown Java app. Without the static typing, that slowed it down a bit. You know, I mean, if they didn't put compile static on there, but if they did really well. And Python was like 10 times slower, interestingly enough, although they can optimize using some of their libraries like PyPy. But at any rate, it was interesting to see Groovy show up in an unexpected domain, I thought, like that. Okay, so at any rate, I put the link in there. And then the other one that came up, have you seen this one, the Graal image with Groovy and Grape there?
Yeah, we've been talking about that one a lot, and it seems really interesting. And yeah, hopefully we'll hear more from him soon.
Do you know how to pronounce his name?
I think the first name is Simon.
Well, I got his name, but I found it. I had to dig a little bit. Simon or Simon,
Well,
Zymon, and then Stepniak, I presume. I mean, I don't know, but you say we've been talking about it. Who's we in that context?
oh, in I think it came up in like the Groovy Slack. It came up in things we're looking at with Gradle and developer advocacy, but it's of course it isn't using Gradle in this context. But I think there's someone working on taking like going beyond this and using it within Gradle too.
Now,
Like
for those who are not
like as a Gradle plugin.
okay, for those who are not aware, Graal is actually, this does look to be a good product. That is a virtual environment that's running on the cloud, and it is optimized to the point where it's incredibly fast. A lot of the Micronaut people do demos of deploying Micronaut to Graal, and they get, the record speeds, things of startups of, a few hundred milliseconds or something like that, incredibly fast. So this article talks about deploying a Groovy script using grape dependencies. So yeah, not Gradle, as you said, onto Graal. And it looked actually a bit more complicated than I would have liked. But then again, Graal's not even officially 1.0 yet either.
Yeah.
But they built that native image, and then they found all the errors they had, and they corrected them by doing compile statics and all kinds of stuff. And I get the bottom line is that they said the average execution time was like 200 milliseconds or something, and the best recorded time is 151 milliseconds, and most of that was network latency. But it was extraordinary. They'd reduced the total execution time from 1.7 seconds to 0.2 using almost the same script, and it looked very impressive there. So again, it's just anything that can run Java can eventually be made to run Groovy. Just maybe sometimes it takes a little bit of effort.
Yeah, well, since it's like, I mean, at least what I've heard about Graal is that you can use it on lots of different platforms. So it's not just about like the JVM, but expanding out even further.
Yeah, they always talked about that as a mechanism for cross-language communication as well. Yeah, as you say, so you could actually communicate with different languages across this Graal runtime or whatever. And it's another one of those things on my list to keep an eye on and eventually look at, but I still haven't dug into it yet. I prefer to wait until something's actually a 1.0, before that happens.
Yeah, that's true.
Now,
okay.
I think that's everything I had. Did you see, or is there anything else you wanted to bring up or anything else you could think of?
You want to plug your newsletter, and so I can plug mine too, right?
Oh, you have a newsletter now?
So okay, so one of my responsibilities is helping with the Gradle newsletter. So newsletter.gradle.com.
Right.
And we should have a new edition in the next day or two. And so you should check it out and subscribe.
Well, the Gradle newsletter I have been very impressed with for a long time. And when I was working with Gradle, I actually was one of the people working on that. And fortunately, Eric took it over and did so much better than I did. I mean, but then again, he knew all the goings on inside of Gradle, made a huge difference. So he's done a fantastic job with that. And to hear that that's going to continue and grow. And so again, the link it's newsletter.gradle.com. Is that right?
That'll link the main site, and then we have like each different editions from there.
Oh, sorry, you hit a little bit of an echo there on your internet connectivity.
Sorry.
It's not you, it's the internet. But yeah, I see that there's a February issue out, February 2019 on the Gradle 5.2 release and upcoming Maven trading and everything. But that, I think, is one of those resources that a lot of people are not as aware of as they ought to be. I really have been very pleased with the Gradle newsletter, and I'm glad we got a chance to push that. My own little newsletter is the one that's, I guess we put it in the notes there because I left it in from last time, but it's, I call mine Tales from the Jar Side, and it's tinyletter.com/cousinit. So at any rate, that's in there if anybody's interested, but that's all just very personal. It's a company newsletter for a one-person company. So that's good. I spent last week, by the way, working at a company where they were still on Grails 2.5, which is really old now, but they had no choice. It's that banner product, and it's locked into the old thing. And boy, it was hard doing things like, well, no, this is old, but there's a fix for it, but you have to use Grails 3 to do it, and very frustrating.
But in the migration from 2.5 to 3.0 is not fun.
No.
So I can really empathize with them wanting to stay on 2.5, but it's like such an open risk to stay there too.
Yeah, I mean,
like you said, like it's end of life. Like the bug fixes are all in 3. Like,
well, and nobody's maintaining any of the older plugins either. I mean, the plugins have all moved to version 3, as they should, And of course, the biggest difference between 2 and 3 in Grails was the move to the Gradle build system, which meant revamping the project structure, and of course, everything flowed from that. So it was a big deal.
And boot, so you could use like lots of plugins just stopped because there was already a Spring Boot alternative, and you can just add it in.
And that's getting to be several years ago now, too. I mean, it's been a while since all that happened. So, but at any rate, no, I'm glad we mentioned the Gradle newsletter, because that really is good. And were you implying that there was a new hire who was going to take over on that, or is that what you're trying to say?
Oh no, I do it.
Oh, it sounded like you said somebody else is good. Okay, I think that's probably where I'll blame the internet garble there.
Oh, sorry.
That. So are you doing it now, or are you taking it over?
The first one I did was October, so everyone since October has been me.
And you've done an awesome job.
Thank you. Well, I mean, it's obviously a team effort. Like, I started and then draft it, and then we all get reviews and feedback and everything.
Oh, the heck with those guys. You're the one doing it. It's
so I definitely care a lot about the community stuff. So I started doing a tweet of the month. So if you want to be my tweet of the month, let me know. And I started including a lot more events. So particularly, I tried to do now content in foreign languages, which is why I was tweeting about it yesterday. So.
I guess I should mention that on that page, the newsletter.gradle.com site, where not only can you sign up, they also, and this I guess is a standard now, is that you keep the last 6 issues available on that site.
Yes, there should be a link either from that one or from the blog to go even further back in history. But we just keep those at the top. So probably not on newsletter.com.
Okay.
There's also the blog. And so if you, more newsletter posts. Oh, no. Okay. Well, I should recommend we fix that.
So you found something?
Yeah, sorry. I don't think you can get past the last 6. And we really should have an archive somewhere. Or maybe I just don't know where it is, and then we need to link to it better.
Might be useful, but I mean, they're really good as they are, and just you don't have to go very far back to go, oh yeah, I want to subscribe to this, So I definitely recommend that. And of course, since you've been writing it since October, that's another good sign.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's everything. I don't have anything else. Do you?
No, we've covered a lot.
We should give Baruch a hard time somehow. I mean, I guess I already have a little bit, but Baruch is off at a bunch of conferences this week and next week. He's traveling all over the world as he does.
Spring is it's not quite spring yet, but it's spring season for conferences is really jam-packed.
Yeah, and it's always I gotta say I'd rather have you here anyway.
Oh.
So I appreciate that you were available. Thank you very much for filling in at the relatively speaking last minute like that. We've got your Twitter handle of the newsletter. You're still Code Generator, right?
Yeah.
AENN there, right? And I know you'll be very active, and I'll see Baruch again at DevNexus, at which point he can say, thank goodness you were there to take over for all this, and as he will.
The next event where someone could see me is JavaLand. So there's the German conference in Brühl. It's at a amusement park, so that'll be fun.
Wow.
And that is the middle of March. So that's my next scheduled talk.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, thank you for that. And we will have at least we'll have a podcast before Grey Conf and Greach. Well, before Greach, really, and we'll play that up again and we'll talk about those. So, thank you very much. And as soon as we stop this, then it'll start going on to YouTube, and then we'll convert it to the audio file and send that out to everybody. And we'll talk to you as soon as we can.
Okay.
You take care.
Bye, everyone.